Okay, we're back into the lecture part of this series for this week, and we are into chapter 2. And I think this is one of the most important chapters because it essentially describes the different perspectives on competitive advantage. That is our external environment and how we interact with that external environment. And as I left off on Saturday, we wanted to know whether or not we have something of value added in our industry that our competitors don't have. Are we doing something, our methodology, better than other organizations are doing that are in that industry? Are we doing something that our industry can't do? Not just don't have, but can't do. Externally, in that environment, competitive advantage is a key ingredient for our long-term success, and that has to be built into the strategy. And this includes survival of all types of organizations, which include not-for-profits like hospitals, municipalities, and even government. And largely, organizations fail because they do not recognize the impact of the external factors which decide our competitive advantage. And also, going back to SWOT, strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats, which we talked about on Saturday. These organizations don't capitalize and they fail because they do not understand their own external resources. And more importantly, not what these resources were designed to do, but also identifying their capabilities. So, if you look at Table 2-1, what's in that table represents different perspectives on what it takes to capture competitive advantage. That is, how do we manage our organization strategically, long and short term, and more importantly, in the long term, where we are more proactive than reactive, because we are taking into consideration changes in our externalities. So I'd like to talk a little bit about the industrial organizational view, IO. The industrial organizational view suggests that organizations look at the impact of important external factors, such as their structural forces identifying with a particular industry. Yes, our structural forces, our salespeople, our marketing people, how are they interacting with the externalities that I just spoke about? Are we able to identify that competitive environment? Our firm's particular standing with the industry? Do we have the right leaders in place that are innovative and they understand the market to know that in their long-term planning they're going to need to understand their competition? How do these influences deal with competitive advantage? How do our planners deal with competitive advantage? The firm's position in the industry and the underlying industry will have certain characteristics that will not only determine how much revenue they bring in, but also, based on their competitive advantage, what their profit margins look like. So therefore, it's not always about making sales. It's about branding our products. It's about managing them strategically so that they can face our competition. And our customers trust our product or service. Because any negative forces in the industry and any delays in updating what we stand for as an organization in our branding are going to cause serious problems down the road. These are the negative forces that your books talk about. So we just don't want to know how profitable we are now. Strategically, long term, we're interested in knowing where our weaknesses are so that we can maintain and exceed our profit margins. Do we understand our product life cycles? Do we have the leadership that knows the industry? Go in and look at Jack Welch and what he did to turn GE around. He had to understand his internal customers first before he understood how to deal with this competitive environment. He came up with management by walking around. He got into the trenches and he knew how the operations worked at GE before he was able to get out there and understand those externalities that I just spoke about. If we look at competitive advantage, we also look at Michael Porter. He's the best known proponent for competitive advantage. He determined that the firm's position within the industry and the underlying industry characteristics determined our potential profitability. So look at Michael Porter and see what he was about. So we talk about positioning in a competitive market in our external environment. We're looking at the structure of an industry and what influences that structure had that is appropriate to organizational conduct. Our organizational conduct meaning we're following our goals and our strategies. Is it just on paper, or are our strategic decisions and actions influenced by how the organization performs as a whole? So, analyzing external forces and basing our strategic planning and decision making on the analysis of our external forces, managers can make sound strategic choices. Our leaders can make sound strategic choices by understanding what makes an industry attractive to the customers that they serve. And choosing an attractive industry, wanting to work in it, and knowing what it's needed to compete will be, or should be, the focus on our strategic analysis. We have to spend a lot of time dealing with some of the major concerns that stack up against our competition and understanding it. Clearly, our competition has the same problems in keeping up with the industry. But we need to know what is happening at the industry level. Again, as I said, we want to give people what they want, not what they need. And that's what Apple did. They gave their customers what they wanted, and they would do anything they could to get it, meaning the Apple people. That was part of their competitive strategy. That's what Steve Jobs left behind, a legacy of giving people what they want, what they didn't know they needed. So, if we look at a resource-based view, a resource-based view emphasizes firms' resources are, whether they understand it or believe it or not, the most important in getting and keeping a competitive advantage. Understand that all organizations have different types of assets and different types of capabilities. But do they capitalize on them? Managing strategically is developing and exploring those organizations' resources, internally and externally, and what they do with them. What type of leadership understands what to do with these resources, let alone recognize them? What do you do with them? How are you proactive and not reactive in utilizing these resources to their most efficient end? An organization is positioned to succeed if it has the best and most appropriate resources for its business. Competitive advantage will accrue to the organization that possesses unique assets or capabilities. So, what I'd like to do at this point is I'd like to talk about how our resources are most utilized and talk a little bit about resources. Well, what do they include? Resources include all financial, physical, human, interchangeable, and structural and cultural assets of the organization. And how are they used by the organization to develop, produce, and deliver products and services to its customers? What are its financial assets? Are they able to cover their expenses so that they can meet customers' demands? What are their physical assets? Equipment, office buildings, manufacturing or sales, wisdom in the human resource area. And that includes the experiences, characteristics, knowledge, judgment of and competencies of all of their employees. How do we measure those competencies against our external environment? There again, this has to be planned out in the strategy. what are our intangible assets? Things such as brand names, patents, reputation, trademarks, copyrights, registered designs. What about our databases? All of this is included. What about our structural and cultural assets? They include the history, culture, work systems, organizational policies, working relationships, levels of employee trust. We talked about trust on Saturday. And the formal structure that's being used. Look at, in your book, figure 2-2. Unique resources will provide a sustainable competitive advantage for our firm. Resources that have all four characteristics can be used to form sustainable competitive advantage. What are those four characteristics? They are, number one, value. We talked about value, value added. What do we offer that's different than our competitors? Resources can be used to exploit external circumstances that are likely to bring in organizational revenues, but the value added brings in the profitability. That's where our competitive advantage comes in place. The other thing value does, it's also used to neutralize negative external situations that are likely to keep revenue from flowing. Resource is valuable in the context of what's happening in the external environment. These are all things that measure the value in our organization. The next thing is rarity. No competing firm possesses the resource that we have. But if we keep that resource in a vault, if we don't get it out soon enough, we're going to do what Kodak did and fall behind the competition. If more competitors acquire certain resources that have been a source of competitive advantage, then they are less likely a source of competitive advantage for an organization. So the thing is that if you have the competitive edge, you know it and have to get it out there before anyone else finds out about it. Even commonly held resources may be valuable for a firm's survival in a competitive environment. You got to use it, because nothing moves without liquidity. So to keep your competitive edge, you have to keep things moving. What I'd also like you to do is look at in your book, Strategic Management in Action, W.L. Gore and Associates. Get on the Gore Company website and look at this particular question. Consider that the patent protection for Gore/Tex has expired. What other resources does Gore have? What is your evidence that they have those resources? You may want to answer that question, understand what we mean by innovative product design, quality, or having great employees. Does Gore's structure and culture give it an advantage? How would that advantage be used to benefit the company and its ability to make profits? In other words, how does the culture lead to the effective use of the resources that you identified earlier? You might be struggling a bit with this, but a key point, and we made a big deal about culture on Saturday, as much as skill set, is that culture can facilitate innovation. Going back to Apple, what did they do? How do they continue to survive at the pace they're surviving long after Steve Jobs has left the planet? What's in his legacy that he leave behind, which allows employees to continue with new and innovative ways of doing things? Exploit these things. How might Gore be able to use this culture to its advantage, whereas other firms might fail using it? You can also take the gorilla view. The gorilla view proposes that an organization's competitive advantage is temporary and can be gained only by peppering this competitive marketplace with rapid, radical changes. This doesn't work for all companies, but sometimes it might be necessary for a company to maintain its competitive edge. An external environment is characterized by continual and often revolutionary changes. Guerrilla companies, or successful companies, repeatedly create competitive advantage based on how the context is changing externally. So, to reiterate, we want to know, well, what view of the organization is best. Managing strategically involves looking both externally and internally to come up with strategies that have a chance of creating a sustainable competitive advantage. Unique resources and capabilities that can be matched to external changes as they are happening. An external environment is continually changing. The source of sustainable competitive advantage is probably found in different places at different points in time. And you have to be continually analyzing the external and internal environments and take advantage of any positive changes that exist. And while recognizing the negative things that have happened. As we said on Saturday, we want to continually use a total quality management approach, a TQM. So the other thing I want to talk about a little bit is for learning income purposes, be able to explain the driving forces, implications, and critical success factors of the business environment. Look at figure 2-3 in your book. They talk about some of the drivers of the new business environment. We're in a world of technology and information. It's really an information revolution early in the 21st century. Information is readily available to almost anyone from anywhere on the globe at any hour of the day and pretty much in any format. We talked about this on Saturday. We have instant availability of information that has radically changed the nature of the business environment, which affects context of strategic management. Information is the essential resource of production. Not simply a means to an end, it's an ongoing process, as is leadership. We look at land, labor, and capital, where we draw our resources, that have become support factors, but not main factors. Organizations must now look at how information and knowledge can be explained. Technology, how do we define it? Using equipment, materials, knowledge, and experience to perform tasks. You're looking at not a live lecture, but by the time you read it, it will seem like one, because it's based on what we would normally have done in class tonight. Look at globalization, how what we do is affected by every corner of the globe. Globalization is essentially a dominant characteristic. Yes, it's the process of turning a creative idea into a product or service and process and marketing something that will generate revenue without actually physically being somewhere sometimes. That's all part of globalization. So the global marketplace should not be just viewed as an outlet for products. It is also a critical source of resources as well. Geographic boundaries don't constrain, are no longer constrained an organization's strategic decisions and actions. We can't control our customers, but we know how to control the environment to make them aware of what we're doing versus our competition. Because just like us competing globally, we have global competitors that are right on their game, and we got to be on our game to understand what they're doing, as opposed to what Kodak did. So, Figure 2-3 in your book talks about some of the implications of these driving forces. And the thing is that there are essentially a bunch of them. 1, 2, 3, 4. The first being continual change. Got to be aware of change at all times. That means knowing the changes in our internal and our external factors. The second, reduced need for physical assets. Manufacturing facilities, office buildings, equipment, inventory. They all impact our economy. And if used as an asset, can be good, but as a liability can bring us right down. So in today's economy, we need to be aware of our customer database. Get in touch with online ordering systems. Continual product innovation and improvement. Employees sharing knowledge, not departmentally acting as a separate company. We need to share knowledge so one department compensates for another on a SWOT analysis. To get that so we can meet our external needs. Vanishing distance and compressed time. Looking at the impact of physical distance and time constraints. Interact by email, text messaging, or other ways to interact. Finally, increased vulnerability. No, because of globalization, we are increasingly vulnerable to our internal and external environments. Always be a change agent. Always know how to stay on your game, and you'll be fine. So look at critical success factors. Always go back to your mission statement. Go back to your vision, your mission, your goals strategically, long and short term. And also, we talked about this, corporate social responsibility. How do we give back for what we take in? So that's all I'm going to cover for this chapter right now. No chapter 2, and keep going with your projects. On hypothetical number 1, I will be posting that shortly. Stay in the main of Blackboard, look at specific directions on hypothetical number 1, and it'll be due next Monday. It's a week from today. It's a shorter version of your project, but I will put specific instructions and how to complete it. Stay safe in the snow, work on your projects, and reach out to me if you have any questions. Take care.